So, welcome to Homeopathy for First Aid and Immune Support. And let's get going. So, first thing to talk about is your tools. And I've put a picture here of a notebook because homeopaths always take notes. If you've been to see a homeopath, you'll know that they will take some notes, many notes. It depends a little bit on us as a practitioner. But there's many functions of notes. And perhaps the first thing to say about notes is that it's great to keep a little notebook and to jot down remedies that you've taken and any response to the remedies. So you've got an idea, or you begin to build an idea of what remedies might be appropriate for you, because we have many thousands of homeopathic remedies. And in our first aid kits, I'm going to show you mine. This is the this is the Ainsworth's first aid kit. And it comes in a neat little box, and there's 42 remedies in it. You can get first aid kits from Helios. They have 36 remedies in theirs, and they have a basic kit with only 18 remedies in. Now, I like to have a 42 remedy kit or a 36 remedy kit because you've got a lot more options. And most of my prescribing this year for my clients has been from a kit like this. And when you look at my box, if you look at the screen closely, you'll see that I've got different coloured lids on some of my little bottles, or little vials, we call them. So there's a little vial of remedy. And the reason for the different coloured lids is because I've replaced some of these over time. And so that tells you something, that if you buy a kit, you can replace them if you give one of the whole bottles away, or you use up all the remedies in the bottle. You can buy a new bottle to pop into the box. And in fact, quite a lot of the expense is the plastic box that it comes in. So what else can I say about these? They're convenient. They're easy to pop into your rucksack or a purse to travel with. I've traveled all over the world many times with mine. I sometimes have one at home and one for travel. I might buy one of these as a gift for people. So very good friends might get one as a wedding present with a nice book on how to use them for homeopathy. They do come with their own little booklet as well. And I haven't got the booklet on display here, but each kit will come with a list of all the remedies in it and the different properties for those remedies. And it will come with a list of complaints. So things like headaches or joint aches and pains or fevers, and it will come with the relevant remedies and the information about those remedies and when and how to take them to a certain extent, which is what we're going to cover today. So when you've chosen a remedy for a particular situation and you've taken that remedy, it is a good idea to take notes. And we homeopaths take notes for several reasons. One is so that when the client comes back and says, "What was that remedy you gave me?" And you can look back and see what it was, and you can see what repetition, we're going to talk about this, what repetition you gave it to the patient at. So you might say, take one a day for 5 days, or take one a week for 4 weeks. Or you might say, in a more acute situation, which is what we're going to talk about today, you might say, let's take the remedy 3 times a day for 3 days to shift a particular acute condition. We're going to talk a lot more about remedies that we're using for acute situations recently. So with my kit, I'm going to be taking myself a remedy, or I'm going to be prescribing remedies for somebody else. Great idea to have a notebook. The other reason to have a notebook is homeopathy has a habit of clearing lots of aches and pains and poor emotional states for us, and we might with time quite readily forget those situations. So when we go back to the notes, we can say, oh yeah, we really were quite bad at that time, and these remedies have helped me. So quite often I will remind a patient of what sort of state they came in to see me maybe 4 months previously, and say, well, you know, you were feeling X, Y, and Z, and now of course you're feeling much better. What else is there to be cured? So we can go back to the notes, and very, very often I find that a remedy that I've given to somebody in a first aid situation, very early in case taking, perhaps before they've even come to me for a more chronic situation, has been a very good remedy for them that could be used again for them in another acute situation. So note-taking is useful. What you'll also see on this particular picture is the little plastic bags in the top right-hand corner there. And so many people get into giving a few remedies to a friend, and these little plastic sachets can be useful to tip a few pills into. And you can write directly on the white label, or you can get some printed labels like I've got here and write on them. So down the line, you know, many people get into homeopathy for themselves and then later on get into homeopathy in terms of training to become a homeopath or to learn more about prescribing for their friends and family. So you'll see at the top of the picture, I've also got a bottle of Australian bushflower essences. I'm a big fan of those. I do courses and workshops on those. And the little remedies you can just see there are some combination remedies, the Mariani combination remedies. And I also do workshops on those. They're amazing combination remedies. What we're going to be talking about today is the single remedies in the kit. So one of the things that I always slip into my kit is a cocktail stick. And the reason for that is the neck of the bottle is quite narrow, and you might need to free up the remedies if they've got a little jammed in there with a cocktail stick. So I always pop a couple of cocktail sticks in here to carry with me. So most of the remedies in the kit are single remedies, not combination remedies. In this particular kit from Ainsworth's, you have 2 combination remedies, and I'm just going to mention those now. There's the mixed pollens, and of course that's for hay fever. And there is a remedy which is called Passiflora Co. And that is short for Passiflora combination. And this is a great remedy for sleep. So useful remedy to take if you can't get to sleep, or if you're in the habit of waking in the middle of the night, and you might take that remedy before you go to bed, and you might take it again if you wake in the middle of the night. So we do have a couple of combination remedies in the Ainsworth's kit. All the other remedies, all the other 44 remedies are single remedies, and I'm not going to talk about them all today. We're just going to look at acute prescribing. So is the remedy right? You know, people sometimes talk about this, you have to get worse to get better. Or they might mention a remedy reaction. And somebody asked me about this earlier on today. Now, I'm not a particular proponent of this. I don't particularly subscribe to this, that you have to get worse to get better. I like people to simply get better. So a lot of remedy reaction, or perhaps having some kind of action take place, is because perhaps the remedy was right, but the potency or the strength of the remedy is wrong. And as an example, I was given a remedy called Thuya on a number of times by homeopaths, and I absolutely hated it. Every time I was given it, I felt glum, I felt flat, I felt exposed, I didn't feel right in my own body, I felt horrid. And it's not to say that a remedy should make you like that at all. It's simply that this remedy, when it was given to me in a different way, it was given to me as a sequence prescription, we call it. It really cleared something very deep in me forever. So I never felt that kind of glumness, that flatness ever again, which was pretty cool. And that's not to say that I haven't used remedies for emotional situations since. I've used them a lot, but it really cleared something very deep for me, which possibly went right back to something like vaccination, which set up a state in me. So potency, I mentioned just before in that, I'm talking about getting the potency or strength of the remedy right for that person or that situation. So the potency is the word that we use in place of strength. And when I looked at potency in the thesaurus, it used terms like power, might, force, and we might talk about it as the strength of an intoxicant, a drug, or in fact a homeopathic remedy. So I thought it was quite cute to find homeopathy mentioned in the thesaurus. So we what you'll see on your little bottles when you look in the kit is you'll see a name. And this one I'm holding up is Ruta graveolens. The English herbal name for that is Rue, R-U-E. Our homeopath name is the Latin name. So we often, as homeopaths, use Latin names. I'm going to pull out another remedy, Pulsatilla nigrans. So this is a Latin name for the wind flower. So unlike herbalists often use the local name, the common or country name. So Ruta is written here, Ruta 30C. Now 30 denotes the strength or the potency, and C is the type of succussion or dilution that it's gone through. So it's short for centesimal, and it means that we've taken one part of the original substance and diluted it 100 parts to get 1C. And then in order to get 2C, the next potency, we take one part of that 1C and dilute it 100 times. So once we've got to something like 6C, which is 6 of those serial dilutions, it's equivalent to 1 drop of that original substance in a swimming pool. We're talking about big dilutions, and we consider that 6C is a low potency remedy. 12C is equivalent to 1 drop in all the oceans of the world. 15C is equivalent to 1 drop in all the Earth's water, all the atmosphere, as well as the oceans. So we're talking about massive dilutions. We're talking about not having any of the original substance there. So we can talk about how it works. We can talk about all sorts of things. What we're discussing here is it's massively diluted, and the water or the substance is holding that memory. The information about the remedy. So in Europe, just to say, you might see the suffix CH. So if you're traveling in Italy and picking up remedies, or France, I believe, you see the suffix CH. So we're talking here about remedies that we've used the centesimal or the 1 part to 100 parts dilution. We also use X potencies, and you might have come across these as tissue salts. And this is where you've got a low potency remedy, and the dilution is 1 part to 10 parts dilution. And you'll see this abbreviated to D in some parts of Europe. So if you're in Germany, you'll see something like 10D on the remedy. In England, we would write that as 10X. So same potency, just slightly different suffix used in some countries in Europe. And then we have much, much higher potencies. So 1M is where we've diluted to, it's basically 1000 C. So it's many, many dilutions and what we call succussions. This is shaking the remedy during its process of being made. 10M, it's 10 times that. So it's 10,000 C effectively, but it's abbreviated to 10M, 10,000. M being mil, the Roman abbreviation. So 1M, 10M, and then we go up to things like 50M, which when I first started using it, I thought, oh, wow, that's really, really high dilution, really high strength. How do I use that remedy? And I was a bit cautious about it, but actually in many ways it works in a very similar way to the 30C. So LM is diluted and usually prescribed as a liquid potency. And we'll talk about the difference between pills and liquids in a bit. And I never found that LM potencies worked very much for me or my clients. And in 2012, many people would agree, the sort of earth frequency changed a lot, and people kind of started to work at higher vibration. And this meant that for me, I found remedies at an LM work much more. So I prescribe these a lot more than I ever used to. And I really like LM potencies now. So just to talk about some of the different potencies that you might receive from a homeopath, but what you're seeing generally I'll come back to what you see in your kit, but what you see in your kit is a 30C or a 200C. So as a rule of thumb, we then got this strength of remedies. Once we found the right remedy for somebody, we are going to look at the strength of the remedy perhaps, and we're also going to look at how we give that, the repetition or the dosage of that. So one dose is either going to be one pilule, one tablet, one soft tablet, or it's perhaps going to be a few grains of the remedy if it comes as tiny poppy seed granules, or it might be 1 drop or 3 drops of a liquid potency. Whatever that is going to be one dose, and then we're going to repeat that at a certain pace. And so for a chronic situation, we might be taking one dose every day for 5 days, and we might be looking at higher strengths. In an acute situation, we might be looking at taking one dose every hour for 6 hours. In an accident, a first aid, situation that's really quite severe, we might be looking at taking one dose as often as every 10 minutes until improvement. So we're always looking to the patient and observing if the patient is showing signs of improvement. And if somebody didn't improve after 3 doses, and I'm talking by about sort of 20 to 30%, if they didn't see an improvement after about 3 doses of the remedy, I may change the prescription. So how do we make up these remedies? What is the dose going to be? So we can have remedies made in a pilule form. This is what you get in your kit, the little tiny round pilules. Those pilules can come in different sizes actually, and the ones in the kit are generally 3 ml, they're quite small. We can get sucrose granules. Now we can get lactose-based softer tablets, harder tablets and powders. So we might not give these to somebody who is genuinely lactose intolerant, although you're taking a tiny amount. So you've got to be pretty lactose intolerant not to respond to that rather. The LM remedies that I mentioned, the liquid potencies, can either be in pure alcohol, so they taste quite strong, or they can be as a water dosage. It's called aqua. So the LM can be created as a water dosage, and that will have a little bit of alcohol in for preservative purposes. Where I've got people who really don't take any alcohol, and by that I mean very strict Muslims, then I can get those LMs made on granules. So they have sucrose granules, but I don't generally do that, but there's no reason why you can't. And you can also get non-sugar pilules. I've never worked with these or prescribed them, but you can actually get xylitol-based pilules from some pharmacies and some suppliers. So who can have homeopathy? Really, anybody can have homeopathy. Anybody of any age, and that includes your pets. And I was even prescribing for someone's plants earlier on in the week. So there is quite a lot of data about homeopathy being used for plants. And what did I observe about the plants in his field was that they had tiny holes in the leaves and something was eating those leaves. And so I was thinking about remedies in exactly the same way as I'd be thinking about for a person who gets bitten a lot. So if someone gets bitten a lot, I'm going to be looking at my insect bite remedies. And for the plant, I was thinking, wow, as a plant, it's getting bitten a lot. Clearly, that's compromising its growth, which is what would happen if we got bitten enough by insects. It would start to affect our immunity and possibly compromise all sorts of aspects of us. So I prescribed a remedy from the first aid kit called Staphylococcus aureus. And trying to find my Staphylococcus aureus, there it is. So I had to remake that remedy because I gave him the whole bottle to try on his plants. And so I suggested that he put the remedy into some water, douse the plants with it once a week, and observe whether some plants that he's doused them with the remedy improve compared to ones that remain undoused. So let's see, I'll report back. So not only people and our pets, but plants can have homeopathy too. So it opens up a whole field. Just a little note on giving remedies to babies and pets. You can get these soft tablets or powders, which, as I say, are lactose-based. They dissolve very quickly, and that's why we tend to use them. They're immediately absorbed into the body through the mucous membranes that line the mouth. But soft tablets are pricey these days, so I don't tend to dish them out myself unless someone asks for them specifically. And you can crush one of these little pilules from the kit between 2 teaspoons and give a few crumbs as the dose. Or you can dissolve a pilule in cooled boiled water and give a little sip as the dose. For pets, you could add remedies to their drinking water. You can try slipping one. What I usually do with dogs is actually slip them in behind their teeth, where they find it quite difficult to get it out. And while they're kind of rooting around with their tongue, trying to spit out the remedy, it will be absorbing into the mucous membranes inside the mouth. So don't worry if a cat or a dog spits out a remedy, or even sometimes a baby spits out a remedy. If it's already been rolled around their mouth a bit, absolutely fine. So what's in your kit? In that basic 18 remedy kit from Helios, you have 30 Cs. In the 36 remedy kit from Helios and this 42 remedy kit from Ainsworth's, you get 30 C remedies. So all the remedies in the kit are 30 C, and that nicely bridges mental, emotional states and physical states. It's not too high a strength. It's a very easy strength for us to work with, especially when we're first getting used to remedies. What you'll notice about the childbirth kit and the mother and child kit from Ainsworth's is that they have some higher potency remedies in them. That's 200 C. And the reason for this is that during childbirth, it's an intense situation. It's a fast moving situation. And so we're matching the intensity of that state with a higher potency remedy. So we tend to move up into these higher potencies when we are in a more profound or intense situation. So what is an acute situation? An acute situation, which is what you're generally using your kit for, has 3 parts as I see it. It has a beginning, the onset, the bit when you say something like, oh, I think I'm just coming down with, or ouch, I just banged myself. Oh, where is my arnica? The bit at which you know that you're coming down with something. And if you can take a remedy at that point, you are likely to stave off any further effects. If you can take a remedy just as you've dropped a heavy spanner on your toe, you may not even get a bruise or a pain. But if you take it an hour or so later, then it's likely that you started to manifest the pain process and the bruising process. So it might be that you take a remedy like arnica for your bump and the bruise comes out more quickly than you'd be used to. So usually it will move the state on quite fast, and it may be that it precludes any other symptoms, and it just means that you resolve the acute. What happens if we don't prescribe or use something to help heal is that we reach a peak point of pain, a point at which we're in the most pain. If we've got a fever or a sore throat or a cold, the point at which we feel most bothered by it. And it might be as well that we move through different stages. So in terms of our remedies, so we might give a remedy at the onset, move on to this point at which, so just say we're brewing a boil, you give a remedy at the onset, it comes to a head. This is going to be the point at which it most hurts, and then we release, discharge and we resolve the situation. We have our resolution. We return to good health. So if it was a cold, we might start with a sneeze. We're trying to expel something. We then produce mucus to discharge it, and then we resolve it. So we have, generally speaking, a three-part process to an acute situation. So what about now? What about now in COVID? Arsenalb is still my number one for contact with a positive COVID case. So if you've got someone who's had a lateral flow test, if you've got someone who's had a PCR test and it's come back positive and you are worried because you've been in contact with them, then you can take Arsenalb 30C from your kit. And I suggest taking it 3 times, once in the morning, once in the evening, and once the next morning, or once in the evening, once in the morning, once the next evening. And I would also give this to somebody who has a positive test, but doesn't have symptoms yet. So we are prescribing the remedy preventatively, prophylactically, knowing that something might happen. And I would use another situation, for instance, another example might be if I was traveling on a plane, I might use a jet lag remedy. Or if I have somebody who's always sick when they travel in the car, I might use a remedy before they travel in the car to prevent travel sickness. So there's situations when we can prescribe before something happens, when we're worried about something happening. Arsenalb is still my number one for contact with a positive COVID case. So if you have somebody who's had a lateral flow test or a PCR test, somebody in the office who's tested positive for COVID, somebody in your family, Arsenalb is still my number one. So you've got Arsenalb in your kit, it's in a 30C. And what I always suggest is taking a dose, 3 doses over 24 hours. So take a dose in the morning, the evening, and the next morning. And you're using the remedies here in a prophylactic way, a preventative way. You haven't yet manifested signs of that disease, but you are worried that you might, okay? So I also make up an immune system support. So I'm going to share with you several documents after the session, and those are the kind of remedies that we're using at the moment: first aid kit remedies, remedies for cuts, bites, and wounds. But Arsenalb is my number one right now for trying to prevent either you getting symptoms or you getting symptoms as badly. So when we give remedies like this, we're giving them preventatively, prophylactically, trying to, and in a similar way to, I might make up a remedy for jet lag and take it before I travel, during travel, and after I've traveled to minimize the impact of jet lag. So from your kit, that's my number one. I would also give it to somebody who's tested positive but hasn't yet got symptoms. Yeah, so if you're in contact with somebody or you've tested positive, it's still my number one for COVID. The onset of an acute, as we've said, is the feeling as if I'm just coming down with something. I feel like I'm getting something. So Ferrum Phos is my personal favorite for the early onset of colds. And I take it hourly at the first sign of getting a cold. So there you can see what I talked about when I was talking about repetition of dosage, that during the onset of something or the peak of pain in an acute, we're taking something every hour. And so what I find is that I've barely taken one remedy and often the symptoms pass. And so what you also find over time is that when you've been taking remedies for, I don't know, several months, maybe a few years, you've been using remedies, you've got homeopathy in your radar, what I find is that when you get to an acute, you actually get through it much more quickly. So we're looking for that. We're looking for comparison. So I talked about taking notes, talked about case taking and taking notes. And so that when I have notes from a client, I can look back and I can see that the incidence of their issue, be it headaches, their headaches aren't coming as often, their headaches aren't as intense, and their headaches aren't lasting as long. That way that I know that we're getting better, we're getting healthier. So when you start to use remedies from your kit, you might notice, oh, I got better really quickly. It doesn't seem, things don't last as long. Obviously, that's good, that's positive. So we've got other fever remedies that we can use. And what we're doing is we're differentiating between those remedies. So we're looking at, for instance, with a remedy like aconite that we give in the very early stages of an acute, it's particularly good if you've started that acute from getting chilled or getting caught in a cold wind. So, you know, I recently got chilled when I was camping and developed a cold, and I haven't had a cold for a long time. And of course, I sort of freaked out, and is it COVID? And I kept having to remind myself that actually I'd got chilled while I was camping, and that was the cause for me getting something. So cold wind, getting chilled, it's good for fevers that come on after midnight. It's great if your kid goes to bed okay, but wakes after midnight with a fever and a slightly glazed look. Belladonna can also have a glazed look, but tends to have a fever with a fiery red face. Now, I've not been seeing that in COVID. I've not really been seeing the aconite fever in COVID. Ferrum phos has been very useful. The other one that's been very useful is Semium. Semium is for feeling really exhausted. It tends to come on quite slowly, but there's a general heaviness and apathy and exhaustion with the fever. So for me, that's been very, very good. I've also been giving it for people who've had that sort of reaction to the vaccines as well, where they've had a COVID vaccine and they are feeling particularly fatigued and worn out after the vaccine. So that can be very helpful. And as a differentiation, Semium is for aches and pains in the muscles, particularly in the back and the legs. Another remedy for aches and pains is, and this one isn't in the kit, but if you always get fevers with a deep bone pain, you might want to get yourself a bottle of Eupatorium Perfoliatum. So you won't find this remedy in your kits. It's more commonly a remedy for tropical fevers. So if you're in another country, South America, Central America, places where they have dengue fever, then Eupatorium Perfoliatum is your sort of #1 remedy for fevers with bone pain. But I am seeing this with COVID. So we do perhaps need to think about having that in the radar for some of our COVID cases. So we're differentiating. To me, to be honest, with COVID, I'm looking at exactly the same things as I'm looking at with any other cold and fever. How is it for you? How is it for that person? And we are comparing or differentiating our remedies. So arsen alb often has a low temperature reading in a fever, but feels exhausted considering they've got such a low temperature. Phosphorus is the opposite. It can have a high temperature reading, but might be full of beans. So you might have a child that you don't actually realize they've got much of a fever until you feel their forehead and you, oh my goodness, and take their temperature, and actually they're full of energy. So here we're differentiating between how it is for somebody. So Semium, those achy muscles in the back. Mercurius might have a fever where the person is also exhausted, like Semium, but they're much more sweaty and they might be smelly and they're very likely to be restless, whereas Semium can be restless actually, but Mercurius really tosses and turns and gets sweaty in a fever. So again, we're differentiating. And just a little note about the Eupatorium is it might especially have aches in the wrists. So these are the kind of things that we're looking out for when we're differentiating. And I'm seeing quite a lot of sore throats this time round, which I really wasn't seeing so much early in COVID. I did give quite a few people Lycopodium. Lycopodium is a red, dry, sore throat, often on the left side, might have difficulty swallowing with changes in the voice, might have difficulty speaking, might have to whisper with that sore throat, and can have sort of stiffness in the throat, stiff neck, might have headache, throbbing temples, mild fever. But it's been my #1 for sore throat in the last 18 months. May move to phosphorus. Phosphorus has a dryness in the throat, a hoarseness in the voice. And I found this weirdly more useful for Londoners than Lycopodium in the early stages back at in March, sort of 2020, April 2020. This year, I've used phosphorus a lot more for the dry cough that people are getting, the tightness in the chest. That seems to be quite common at the moment. And mercurius is sometimes called Merc Vivus or Merc Sol. So depending on your kit, this is the Ainsworth's first aid kit, and they in their kit call it Merc Sol. It's pretty much the same remedy. There's some very slight differences, but really pretty much the same remedy. And this is for when the sore throat progresses to swollen glands. Now, something that I'm seeing in young people, and I'm just going to pop this, we'll go into some more questions in a minute. I'm just going to pop this remedy in the chat box. It's called Barita Carb. It's not a remedy that is in the kit, but I've been giving this to young people who've had the vaccine, who've subsequently got COVID. They're tending to have it for quite a long time. And what they've got is swollen glands. Now, we haven't seen swollen glands with COVID up until the post-vaccine time. So we're beginning to see swollen glands in young people, and I've been giving them this remedy, Barita Carb, to shift that. So that one, as I say, isn't in the kit. You might need to get separately. But mercurius, Merc Viv, Merc Sol, can be for a sore throat that progresses to swollen glands. Usually there's a lot of salivation. So that's the differentiation for you. You can see phosphorus has the more the dry cough, bit of hoarseness. Mercurius has this increased salivation, and it may sweat and have the fever. So they feel generally worse at night, and they feel generally unwell, and they feel worse when they sweat, which doesn't make sense to me because normally the sweat is the relief. The sweat is the bit when the fever cools down. So if you're flopping in and out of fever and you can't shift it and you're sweaty, think about mercurius. Now let's have a look at some specials. So these are in your kit. And I'm calling them specials here because they're special to 2020 and 2021. Natmur in your kit is the most used remedy for loss of sense of smell and taste. So the minute that comes up, take a dose of Natmur. Bryonia is my most used remedy for, and I've called it the headache because the headache that comes is more common in men. It's a very dehydrated state with COVID and fevers that we're getting at the moment. So you might also feel thirsty. You might feel very dry inside, but that persistent headache for most people is shifted with some bryonia. And as I said earlier, when we're looking at dosage and repetition of remedies, we're thinking at this stage of it, you might have had symptoms for 3 or 4 days. Think about taking the remedy 3 times a day. So I may well say to somebody, you've got the loss of sense of smell and taste, take Natmur 30C 3 times a day, and you should find that shifts within 24 hours. If it doesn't, take it for another 24 hours and it should shift. The loss of sense of smell and taste shows us that we're deficient in zinc. Now, I've seen many people taking zinc as a supplement and still needing still showing loss of sense of smell and taste. So Natmur is most useful, bryonia is most useful for the headache. And what I'm seeing commonly at the moment with positive COVID cases is quite a lot of nausea. Again, didn't see this last year. So with the nausea, most people are doing well on Nux vomica. Nux vomica in your kit, 30C 3 times a day, should shift the nausea. And I haven't yet seen anybody who hasn't shifted it within 3 doses. So those are useful ones for this year. And then we talked about with the acute, the resolution, the point in something, an acute stage where we start to expel or try to expel, try to shift the matter that our bodies produce, the waste matter that needs to shift. And I'm getting quite a lot of people with blocked nose, blocked sinuses, catarrh, and my main remedy is K-Libic. If the catarrh is, if the nose is running and it's clear, it's Napmure. Now I had a common cold and I was sneezing a lot and I was shifting a lot of left-sided clear runny mucus. Napmure was helping me with that. I also took a dose of a hay fever remedy, which is called Allium Cepa, that's in your kit, which is for left-sided clear runny nose. Didn't really do much. Napmure did more. So observe which remedy's helping. Napmure helped me, and I literally took one dose of K-Libic when I felt like it was a bit blocked. But I've been giving this a lot for positive COVID cases with catarrh in the nose, sinus, and throat. And there's often a sense of rawness with K-Libic. You might feel raw and sore at the back of the nose, raw in the throat. And I've written ropey and thick because that's what we remind ourselves as training homeopaths. K-Libic, ropey and thick. The snot is ropey and thick, and it may even sort of come out in strings if you've got it bad. So think about giving K-Libic 30C 3 times a day for that thick, blocked up sinus. We might move on to a cough. I've mentioned that phosphorus has been really helpful for the dry cough with the tight chest. If the cough is deep and barking and troublesome at night and dry, have a look at Drosera in your kit. That's a really good remedy for a troublesome nighttime cough, particularly coming on at midnight. If the cough is deep, the chest is tight, there's bubbling in the chest, and you're really worried that you're getting a chest infection, then the remedy usually is ant tart. That also is in your kit. So when I talked about the remedy kits, I talked about the 18 remedy kit from Helios, very useful basic kit. Much better if you can get one of these kits. It's got 42 remedies, or the 32 remedy kit from Helios, because you've got all these remedies in it, apart from the Eupatorium that I mentioned. Quite often at the moment, and I've done this in the last month to 6 weeks, I've been giving sulfur. Now the remedy sulfur is good for the for an acute cold or flu that's dragging on a bit. So I'm finding that with whatever people are suffering at the moment, it seems to be dragging on. And I'm saying, take sulfur 30C 3 times a day to just finish off that acute. So it's a really good remedy to remember. And then silica is a remedy where someone's never been well since an acute. They haven't quite picked up. They haven't. So it's not that the acute is dragging on. The acute's over, but they don't feel quite back to themselves. Give a dose of silica and see their energy pick up. So these are great remedies for resolution, the end of something. Oops, just moved that the wrong way. Let's just see. Oh, I repeated the sore throat bits. There you go. And PS, remedy reactions that I talked about earlier are generally pretty rare. So that's me on my motorbike. Let's stop the share and go back to questions. Lots of questions. That's good.
Yeah, there's a few now. So this is Frank. I'd like to know what the protocol is for taking the remedies at the onset of any symptoms. Is it always the same, or does it depend on what we're treating? I mean, timing, dosage, intervals, etc. How quickly do they start working?
Yeah, good. Great question. Thanks. So generally speaking, if you've got that, oh, I'm just coming down with, I recommend that you take the remedy that you've chosen once an hour. And if you don't feel any relief after 3 doses, then I would think about taking a different remedy. If you think, oh, 30% better, keep taking that remedy. And what we usually say is to take that remedy for up to 6 hours and after that to start to take it 3 times a day. There was a little bit of that I didn't answer. What was that, Vicky?
So remedies at the onset, any symptoms, always the same, or does it depend on what we're treating? How quickly do they start working? I think you kind of answered that.
Okay, cool.
Marion asked about inflammation remedies.
Inflammation.
Yeah. Said inflammation remedies ?
Yeah, so depends on where we've got inflammation. I mean, if we've eaten some food and our tummy is bloated, then we are inflamed in the gut. And for that, I would probably take a remedy called Lycopodium that's in your kit, or possibly a remedy called Carbo-Veg. And then you're differentiating between Lycopodium that has a tight tummy, you want to loosen your clothes, and you might be very windy, and can be a bit constipated. Carbo-Veg is more when you get that tight tummy and that discomfort, but it comes because the food is breaking down in the wrong part of the gut, so it's happening later on at night. Maybe you might wake in the night with the pain in the night. You might have lots of rumbling and wind going on, so Carbo-Veg might be more useful. And because your tummy is inflamed, so this is amazing. I'm going to be talking about this in a couple of weeks. I'm being interviewed for something, so make sure we've got the Zoom on properly for that. But the inflammation in the gut is fascinating because the small intestine is absolutely huge. It has a surface area, the whole of your gut has a surface area about the size of a tennis court. So when you think about that huge area and its absorptive capacity, and the fact that that might get swollen and distended in its action, it's really quite mind-boggling. So if you've got a remedy that can help with that type of inflammation, what it's telling us is that either food is getting to the gut too soon and it hasn't been processed properly in the stomach, and it's causing irritation and the gut is swelling in response. It doesn't want that food to be absorbed because it's not broken down enough. Or it might be telling us that the wrong kind of food has come through to the system. It might be telling us that there's holes in the gut, that we have a leaky gut. So these are the kind of things that's better to kind of be unpicked with your homeopath one-to-one, but nothing to stop you in the short term taking a remedy for gut inflammation. Or it might be that you've got inflammation in your joints, that you have something like a rheumatic type pain in your joints, and you're looking at a remedy like Rustox. So you'll see there's lots of remedies in the kit for aches and pains in the joints. And the two key ones are Rustox and Ruta graveolens. Now, in the main, Ruta graveolens is for stiffness and pain in smaller joints, non-load-bearing joints. And Rustox is suitable for pain in the larger joints, pain in the muscles of the back and the muscles of the thigh. Really interesting fact is that when we're in utero, before we've really formed our limbs properly, very, very early on, there's a certain type of tissue which forms the back of our body. And that actually twists around to form our limbs, our legs. And so that tissue on the back of the body curves around to form the front of our thighs. And then our limbs grow in utero. And that same remedy, Rustox, is used for the back of the body as for the front of the thighs. So if you've been exercising, you've been doing lots of squats, Rustox is your remedy. If you've been lifting a lot of heavy weights, Rustox is your remedy. If you've got inflammation in larger joints, hips, knees, load-bearing joints, it's more likely to be Rustox. Shoulder aches and pains, more likely to be Rustox. So it's a rule of thumb. we could have inflammation, as we've discussed, in the form of fever. And the main remedies for fevers, as we've said, are Ferrum-phos, aconite, belladonna, and there's one that I didn't mention, which I haven't really been using in COVID, but which is fundamental for kids in the family, and that is Camamilla. Camamilla is the main remedy for teething and for fevers that go with teething. Occasionally we'll use it for adults, but they've usually got to be a pretty bad-tempered adult for me to give them Camamilla. So just on that, what I haven't mentioned so much with these fever remedies is our emotions. You know, so with aconite, and we may be anxious, we may have the fever come on from anxiety. With belladonna, we might actually be a bit delusional, which can be quite scary as a parent if you've got a delusional child, you know, who's seeing weird shapes in the room. You know, my daughter once started babbling about something that was in the room that she was seeing. I was like, she needs belladonna, because if someone's starting to hallucinate with a fever, A, we need to be careful, and B, you know, so that might be a situation where we go to the doctor sooner rather than later. But I gave her a dose of the remedy belladonna, and she turned to me and said, "Mummy, can I have a drink, please?" So I knew she was back and not hallucinating anymore. So it's pretty extreme, obviously. But brain inflammation is what you're trying to avoid with these remedies. You know, these are remedies that you may be taking on the way to the hospital with a sick child, because you're worried about where this fever might go. So if you've got a fever and it's not breaking, change the remedy. If you've got a fever in a young child, and actually I will send you my fever docs for guidelines on that. Just make a note about that. I've got 2 that are really useful. You know, when to call the doctor, at what point do we say this remedy isn't working, I must go to the doctor. And that taking a remedy hourly for 6 hours, if you haven't resolved something and you're worried, go to the doctor, go to the emergency room. So inflammation, you know, fever that leads to inflammation which is not coming down, we need to do something about. So other remedies for inflammation, as I said, aconite, belladonna, camamilla, Ferrum-phos. These are our main fever inflammation type remedies. Any other sorts of inflammation anyone's worried about? Pop it in the chat box. Someone's just said, what remedy would you recommend for loss of memory? This is a very great question, Lauren. From the kit, the first remedy that comes to mind is Lycopodium. Lycopodium can muddle up their words, so they can use they can give something the wrong name. So if you were finding that your memory was affected because you drank lots of champagne last night, you might be taking Nux vomica, which is a great remedy for hangovers. But to really kind of, because you've got a hangover, you might be taking that. When you think, oh, actually, this has really affected my memory. Where's my brain today? Try a dose of Lycopodium. It's a really good remedy for memory loss. There are lots and lots of remedies for memory loss, and it is what we would call a chronic situation. So generally here we're talking about acute situations, but try Lycopodium for memory loss in an elderly person. Phlebitis, someone's asked about inflammation of the veins, phlebitis. So when you see a condition and it has itis written on the end, that means it's an inflammation. So phlebitis is inflammation of the veins. And the remedy from your kit for phlebitis would be Pulsatilla. So Pulsatilla is lovely remedy. And it can also be used for things like mastitis. So that's inflammation in the breast, usually associated with breastfeeding. Pulsatilla it prefers for, it's like the phlebitis is worst when the legs are hanging down. So they might want to sit with the legs rested up. So we're observing these things about our patient or about ourselves. And better So it's an interesting thing, actually, varicose veins or inflamed veins, because sometimes it's painful for people and sometimes it's not. So Pulsatilla may not have pain in the veins. Lachesis may well have pain in the veins. Lachesis veins, varicose veins, inflammation may start on the left-hand side of the body. It's a very left-sided remedy. Lachesis varicose veins, for instance, may be very dark. Pulsatilla more inflamed but painless. So again, we're differentiating. Would you be happy with taking a remedy every 2 hours during an acute? Yes. If there isn't like inordinate pain, I often say to people, take it every 2 hours. You know, with taking remedy hourly, you're looking at chasing off intense pain, really. Vicky, anything else you spotted?
Yeah, there was one going back to fevers. Someone asked, would you try to nip it in the bud on early onset or allow the body to have a fever to burn off naturally?
I think that depends on your own level of health anxiety, or your own desire to get back to work, or your own health anxiety. So for me, when I have a fever, I think I'm going to die. So I take the remedy every hour. I don't mind admitting that to you guys, because that's how I am, you know. So my remedy for my fevers, or my state of, might not even go into a fever state. My state might be complete not even exhaustion. I feel like someone's pulled the plug. So I would be taking a remedy every hour because I'm impatient, because I like living life to the full, and I don't want to be bothered with being ill. That tells you a lot about me. That what we need to ask is questions about you. So yes, I would be taking a remedy early on. I'd be like, feel like I'm just coming down with something. Let me take a dose of ferrum phos. Or I might have few remedies put together. So I'll have ferrum phos, and this is where we combine remedies. I usually have ferrum phos, aconite, and belladonna combined in my cabinet, and I may do something like that. Or if I'm not clear about someone's state, I might give them a combination like that. There's nothing wrong with combination remedies. What I will say about an acute state, though, is it's usually pretty clear. You know, so when you've got a woman in labor and she's got backache and she is chilly, you're comparing between two different remedies. If she's got backache and she's feeling a bit warm, then you're going to be giving her another remedy. So often as homeopaths, we're comparing these physical states. You know, we're comparing, are you warm with this? Or are you cold with this? Are you anxious with this? Or are you feeling a bit glazed, a bit dazed with this? So, you know, the Semium patient is likely to be looking a bit dazed and knocked out. The phosphorus patient might be, as I said earlier, a bit more lively, a bit more, they may well be anxious. You know, they may well be asking you a lot of questions. You know, how is someone compared to normal? You know, and you know, if it's someone in your radar, you're going to say, oh, you don't really look like yourself, or you don't really seem like yourself. So when you give them a remedy and they come back to being a bit more like themselves, you know you're on the right track. So yeah, that tells you a lot about me.
There's a question about the combination remedies. With the kit, do we get one pill of each remedy for every dose? When you say combination remedies?
Oh yeah, if you're putting remedies together, generally what I would do is take one of each remedy as the dose. So you might put a way to make your remedies last longer. So each of these little bottles probably has, I think, I don't know, a good sort of 30 odd remedies in, maybe 40 remedies. I've never actually knocked them out on the table and counted them, but I could. Because I can make up new ones, of course, you're not going to do that. But I could do that. So you've got lots of little remedies in here. And what you could do if you were going to combine 3 remedies. So I'm just going to pull out 3 remedies here. So these 3 remedies, arnica, rustox, and ruta, we might put together as a nice little therapeutic for aches and pains. So while I talked about differentiating between rustox and ruta for joint pains or joint inflammation, we may also pop all these together and take one of each every day for 10 days for general achy joints and pains. So we might, we might be feeling a bit rheumatic with ourselves, and we might do something like that. A way of making your remedies last longer, if you're going to take any remedy, or particularly if you're going to combine remedies, is to take one of each remedy, to pop it into a glass of water and to sip that every hour for 6 hours. And that's a way of simply being economical with your remedies and making them last longer. So yeah, combining remedies is possible. Taking one remedy and seeing its effect, though, is the best.
There was a question earlier back on breathing difficulties. Anything for breathing difficulties, capacity due to COVID?
I haven't used it that much because I haven't got that far with my clients. Clients have got better before then. The main remedy I've used recently is phosphorus for the tightness in the chest. And this has been in a couple of asthmatics. So we know their chest is compromised already. And I've said to take phosphorus 3 times a day. And that has cleared it, even if it's taken them 3 days to clear the tightness in the chest. However, if somebody has got breathing difficulties, then this remedy, Carbo-Veg, would be my number one. And I would have put it in a glass of water and be giving it frequently. I'm not seeing persistent coughs. I'm seeing stuff shift with the remedies. So yeah, any other questions on that sort of thing? Main remedy, say, is Carbo-Veg. Possibly if somebody came in and they have a cough with a lot of they haven't had any remedies at all, they haven't had their arsenicum, and they've got an absolutely racking cough, and it really feels like they're going to lose their lungs, I might use arsenicum. So from the kit. But you really, if you get stuck with any of this, see a homeopath. There's loads of us.
There's one more question. What if you're pretty much recovered from something, i.e. COVID, and you start to feel like you're getting something again? Is that an onset? Really good question. So this is something that I have seen a lot in passing years. So the last sort of 2-3 years, I've seen what we call relapsing complaints. So I've seen somebody do an acute and then seem to resolve it, only to go back into it. So this gets into what we call more chronic, or constitutional prescribing, and it goes into some of our big remedies, and I'll mention a couple of them. Tuberculinum and Carcinogen are 2 remedies that you may have heard of, or you may have had prescribed at some stage, and they're particularly good for relapsing states. And so it usually takes a bit of time to observe that you've got better and you've now gone back into the state. Another remedy that can really help people who have that predisposition to always getting something. And again, we're talking about chronicity here. So we're talking about somebody doing something chronic. Oh, I'm always getting sick. Probably the biggest remedy that you'll have alighted on when you're looking at your kit is the remedy Silica. So Silica kind of has that. It's quite weak physically. And we're talking about chronic here. We're talking about one's constitution. We're talking about generals. Another remedy that often gets coughs. So when people say things like, oh, it always goes to my chest, I might be looking at differentiating between calc carb that's in your kit and phosphorus. But again, that's slightly more chronic situations. So what I want to do is A, round up because it's 8:15. B, apologize hugely for not plugging in my Ethernet. Make a large note to myself to do that. I knew there's a little danger today because I wasn't working with my crib sheet, and that was it. I will re-record the first part and I'll get Julie to
piece that together with this so that we've got all this information together in one place. So it might take me a few days to do that. What I was going to say is that I am going to be running a first aid course. So if you want to learn more about homeopathy, if you want to learn a bit more about this, then Vicky, if you can pop the information in the chat box, that would be great. Brilliant. Yeah, Vicky's just put that in there. So I'm doing, have a look at the link. We've got early bird on that running till midnight on Sunday this weekend. I'm chatting to Julie tomorrow, so we'll see how quickly we can get this up and available to listen again to. But drop me a line by email if you've got questions about the course. We've got 4 dates. Each session gets recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again, and I will plug into my Ethernet. And I always do smaller WhatsApp groups so that we can have a chat space as optional, of course. You don't have to go into the WhatsApp, but it means that you can ask questions between the sessions. This time, unlike my earlier first aid courses, I'm going to set a tiny bit of homework. So I'm going to kind of make sure that the information embeds a little bit so that, yeah, it'll be fun, but just something super easy to do and share. So if that's of interest, have a look at that. And as I say, early bird ends on Sunday at midnight. But thank you all for being so patient, and yeah, lots of love to all of you.